Hello, my name is Laura Averallda Melaty. Now I would like to analyze a short story, A Respectable Woman by Kate Chopin. A Respectable Woman is made in 1894. Kate Chopin delves into a psychology of Mrs. Baroda, a wealthy woman with a loving husband who faces temptation in the person of Gouvernail, a polite, unassuming visitor to the Baroda plantation. Like the heroine of A Pair of Silk Stockings, Mrs. Baroda is enticed early in the story with the prospect of a change from a quieter, more ordinary life. But whereas Mrs. Summers gives into her desires with relative ease and begins spending her extra money after limited deliberation, Mrs. Baroda doesn't instantly recognize what she really wants and eventually struggles with her self-imposed limitation of her identity as a respectable woman. Now, the first, I would like to tell you about the themes. There is two themes that are found in A Respectable Woman. The first is identity. The theme of identity, or how we define ourselves and others, is explored in the short story through the characters of Mrs. Baroda and Gouvernail. As the story unfolds, we see Mrs. Baroda imagining who Gouvernail is and what he is like, being contradicted by reality when she meets him, and finally being unable to figure him out. The woman first expects the man to be cynical to dislike him. However, Gouvernail turns out to be a likable, non-imposing man. Still, this makes the protagonist feel puzzled by the man's personality. And the second one, this is desire versus restraint. The theme of desire versus restraint is only explored by Mrs. Baroda's character. Why? As she gets to know her husband Franz better, who is a guest at their plantation, the woman begins to experience mixed feelings toward him. On the one hand, she claims she likes him, that he is a lovable, inoffensive fellow. On the other hand, she is bothered by the fact that he doesn't pay her enough attention and tells her husband that she finds Gouvernail tiring and boring. Her mixed feelings are actually the way she copes with her physical desires for the guest, which she only realizes once they are alone and the man begins opening up to her. And after themes, I would like to tell you about the characters. There are three main characters in this short story. The first is Mrs. Baroda. Of course, Mrs. Baroda was a little provoked to learn that her husband expected that his friend Gouvernail to spend a week or two on the plantation. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous because this is my final exam. Okay, the first I would like to explain the outer and inner characterization of Mrs. Baroda. The first detail about her outer characterization that you should note is that the narrator only gives us her surname, which further emphasizes the message of the title. The woman defines herself as respectable, as a true lady. Apart from this aspect, we also know that Mrs. Baroda is married to Gaston and they own a sugar plantation, suggesting that they are wealthy part of higher class. Nothing is said, however, about the couple having children or regarding the woman's physical aspect, except that the night when she talks with Governor, she wears a white gown and that she has a pretty face. And after that, I would like to tell you about inner characterization. Mrs. Baroda's inner characterization is conveyed through her thoughts, gestures, and attitude to her husband and Governor. Initially, she comes across as rather pretentious and affected, as she bothered by the prospect of entertaining yet another guest when she desires to spend some time alone with her husband. I have the quotation is, she was looking forward to a period of unbroken rest now and this undisturbed tt with her husband. Sorry, I don't know how to speak it. And after Mrs. Baroda, there is a Governor. Governor was slim enough, but he wasn't very tall, not very conical. Neither did he wear eyeglasses, not carry his hands in his pockets. I would like to explain about outer characterization and inner characterization of Governor too. From his outer characterization, we find out that he is Gaston Coolidge's friend, who is in the present a journalist, in no sense a society man or a man about town, and a smoker. About inner characterization is Governor's inner characterization is constructed based on his actions and attitude, but also following her perspective of Gaston and Mrs. Baroda. For Mrs. Baroda, he is a likable man, yet she cannot see the same qualities in him as her husband does. She could discover in him none of those brilliant and promising traits which Gaston, her husband, and had often assured her that he possessed. On the contrary, he sat rather mute and receptive before her chatty eagerness. That is the quotation. Although the man is courteous, Mrs. Baroda sees him as unsociable because he doesn't seem to be attentive enough to her. The last is Gaston. But why she liked him, she could not explain satisfactorily to herself when she partly attempted to do so. She could discover in him none of those brilliant and promising traits which Gaston, her husband, had often assured her that is possessed. Gaston's auto characterization is present him as the husband of Mrs. Baroda and a sugar planter who owns a plantation or estate and went to college with Governor. And inner characterization, Ian succeeds as he is only a supporting character. All we know about his inner traits is that she appreciates his friend Governor, whom he has described to his wife as clever and a man of ideas. Also, Gaston seems to love his wife, calling her sweet names such as Mabel or Sire Ami. However, he seems to be obsessed of his wife's attraction to his friend's Governor. After the characters, I would like to tell you about the setting. And the setting, I have two setting in this part. I would like to explain about time and physical setting. When and where a story takes place can be profoundly significant. Consider where the author's story is placed and why the author made that decision. The second setting is social setting. Social setting or cultural context is an aspect of setting that pertains to the human environment among among which events occur and among which characters live or interact. I have quotes is, when Gaston arose in the morning, his wife had already departed. He had taken an early morning train to the city. She did not return till Governor was gone from under her roof. Uh, this setting, a lot of people said that the place is in New Orleans because in the situation like in 1894, and the situation is because and the sugar plantation too in the New Orleans, there is a sugar plantation. After setting, I would like to tell you about plot. There is a conflict, climax, and resolution on this story. The conflict is Mrs. Baroda seems too disappointed when she met her husband's friend because she didn't find the good traits of him at all. The governor was very different from how her husband described him to her. But even though she felt disappointed, she still tries to observe him first, and she should be like him because he's a lovable and inoffensive fellow. But still, she felt puzzled by his attitude and remains big. The climax is when Mrs. Baroda sitting on the bench and Governor came up to her all of a sudden and sit beside her. He brought her a scarf from Gaston to give it to Mrs. Baroda. Governor started the conversation by reciting lines of poetry, and then the topic went play. And the part of the resolution is Mrs. Baroda has departed to her aunt's place in the morning after that night. And sometimes later, when she came back home, she has a talk with her husband about having Governor back to their house. Mrs. Baroda, at that time, has overcome everything. She realized that being a respectable woman was a very sensible one for her. So it wouldn't be a problem if Governor comes to visit them again. The symbolism, a look to symbolism is in Governor and Gaston. Gouverneur is a French word meaning an underwater vane used to steer a vessel. The quotes to support it is, Gouverneur's personality puzzled Mrs. Baroda, but she liked him. Indeed, he was a lovable fellow. And Gaston is a French word meaning an uncertain or outsider. Quotes to support it is, her husband Gaston was surprised and delighted with the suggestion coming from her. Okay, this is my thesis statement. And the last part of this. Kate Chopin, A Respectable Woman, addresses the theme of the struggle of a woman's freedom against societal limitation through the thoughts and feelings of the main character, Mrs. Baroda. Okay, I